Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 2 of the Oddworld podcast. It has been a while since the first episode, where we looked at the trailer for Soulstorm, and I shared some of my kinship with Oddworld, and particularly its connection to my personal, I guess you would say, sort of mythology inspired, but also in a sense my own sort of mythology, which is the quantum myth and the patterns that are sort of a cross section between, you have morphogenesis, which is this process in the natural world of how any of nature's patterns are created. If you are a fan of paramites, like the way that they sort of create their webs is kind of similar. So Oddworld, then you have obviously Legacy of Kain's sigils. You'll see a bit of a similarity between that and some of the work that Raymond Swanland did with Oddworld. Then you have obviously like Darth Maul's pattern, so it's like the trifecta of a certain period of time where there was just a certain sensibility of pattern making, and that was like hugely influential. And like the most out of all of those was for me, Oddworld. Yeah, and again, since we probably are welcoming quite a few new listeners from across the different Oddworld communities, including the Instagram and the Reddit, and now both Reddits, which is Oddworld Inc. and Oddworld. So welcome all of you. And what's really great about this time with Oddworld is there is a lot of speculation and a lot of anticipation for what the next move after Soulstorm will be. What we saw with Soulstorm is a declaration of a new direction and a declaration of a new identity, which is again, as someone who followed God of War pretty extensively, right from its announcement all the way through to release, and sending letters to the devs and stuff, and Corey Barlog, the director, sending the God of War podcast. They sent us a poster. Matt Sofos, the writer, really active and responsive on Twitter. As someone who sees that the connection between community and creator should be much closer and more symbiotic, rather than a sort of us and them dynamic. And obviously, it's on the devs to have that initial impetus as the creators to make the work. But there's so much say that we have as a community. I also run the the Order podcast, and I kind of hold that up, hopefully not as a permanent cautionary tale, because I do hope that we do eventually see a sequel to The Order, and I do know that the IP was recently renewed. But that's proof of how much a community can influence the prospects of a series and of an IP. And you have a couple of pretty good analysis videos out there that cover and sort of explore and discuss that sort of convergence of factors that led to The Order sort of being shelved as an IP. And there was, some aspects related to, I guess, even mood choice. It was a very somber game compared to some of the others. Despite its lore, people were saying stuff about the length, which was, to me, like completely missing the point. And I guess I'll segue us back to Soulstorm on that front, which is there's a sense that I again respectfully believe that a bit of an unchallenged, and that's why I did challenge it, and that's why I've sort of created Oddworld Inc. On Reddit. A bit of a runaway narrative, I think, which I don't think is naive, and I don't think is, ill-informed. That Oddworld inhabitants, have lost their way or anything like that. I think if you look at Soulstorm and don't see what it clearly is, which is just, it's almost like a reboot, and it's a reboot that they had to, as in a stylistic reboot, it's a continuation of the new and tasty Quintology, and it's Quintology Part 2, but, that's very clearly for me what it was. And it was an endeavor that they had planned, obviously, on going so much smoother, and the pandemic does not do any favors to like super independent creators like Oddworld. And there was some stuff on the subreddit, I think, about just like me jumping in, as though I was like hired or sent or whatever. It's like furthest thing, couldn't be the furthest thing from the truth. I'm independent. I am a graphic designer living in Canberra, and I enjoy putting together these, almost like scrapbook like kind of chronicles of the various different, universes and that I appreciate, including Oddworld and Legacy of Kain and Star Wars, and they're just, as I mentioned, like fully in my DNA as a person. And it's been good to sort of make some lovely friends along the way. Speaking of which, to some of the folks who will be joining us on episode 4, on episode 3, just wanted to shout them out. So I've been speaking with some of the folks. I'm very proud of the community. We've just come up to almost 50 people, and which is just really positive. And yeah, we're at 42 members, so meaning of life. And there's just been a general sense of positivity to the whole. And I think that's a bit of a sign of that it needed to happen, sort of thing. And I've had a few posts saying like, I'm glad that we've seen some of that positive talk return. And I think Oddworld Fan mentioned, he's the user, mentioned like, thank you for doing this, and a couple of other posts, which I'll just kind of give some shouts out. So Fella Film, who I just recently replied to, shout out to you, who provided a nice kind of history of sort of what's going on between the subreddits and stuff. But as I mentioned, we're sort of moving forward. And shouts out to Hett 1138, who will be joining the show, hopefully with episode 3, right? And then we also have Technomaster, which is a cool name, and then the Muskalunge, 2B2T. So these wonderful, really, really awesome community members who are really engaged, the communicative, and that's kind of sort of what I wanted to maybe use as a launching platform as I go into the Stranger Talk, because this episode's called, 17 Strange Years. Look at that. Like, look at just, even with a few community members, look at how dynamic and I've actually, and involved and engaged and hopeful the community is. Like, it's almost like recognize, like seeing how quickly a plant is growing as soon as you give it a little bit of moisture. And that's very much how I felt about this sort of underrepresented side of the Oddworld. Community. And just as a bit of an example, if you just go to Oddworld Inc. on Reddit, there was someone who kind of made a comment like, "Oh, Oddworld needs more positivity. Please don't leave it for good, Albert." So that's to Vivid Marzipan 2460. So shout out to you. That, I think, sort of led me to sort of plant my feet and want to sort of assert that again as respectfully as possible, to assert the views that I had about going forward from here, like between Oddworld inhabitants themselves and the community, like maybe some disconnections of some kind. But my thing is like, okay, like let's accept everything. Let's look at everything as like, this is what happened, and let's move forward, right? Like everything, and having that moving forward perspective, which leads me neatly into this topic of this podcast, which will be the Stranger 17 strange years that it's been, and the sort of taking the kernel of what Stranger's Wrath was, right? And there's a reason why I almost said Stranger Things. Bear with me. It's to do with my actual predictions about Oddworld's direction. And I'm recording this after the gigantic $70 billion acquisition from Activision. Being bought by an Activision Blizzard, being bought by Microsoft. And so, I mean, I'll give a little teaser. So Stranger Things, obviously Netflix. And my thinking is that we're going to get Netflix approaching Oddworld, because Lorne and Sherry have always wanted, they've talked about it for like 20 plus years now. Make the games and then make films out of the games, or even an animated series, which Arcane for me is a touchstone for. So that feels like such an organic and beautiful fit. And, call me crazy, but that's what I really think is going to happen. Okay, so we'll dive into the possibilities of that later. But, just to ground things in what we know and what has been proven, which is like, look at how successful and refreshing it was after Munch, which people had many certain thoughts about. Little Alley Cat, who is a prospective future guest, she sent a private message being like, "Thank you so much for liking whatever post," and in big capital letters like, "I love Abe and I love Munch." There's a lot of people who love those two, and I would, for example, love to see some of the elements of Munch's Odyssey, which was their first kind of 3D sort of quasi-open worldy with just like these big roaming areas, and seeing that revisited and honored. The reason I'm focusing more on Strangers, Stranger, Stranger's Wrath, wow, when another sort of word sort of enters the lexicon and sort of becomes that muscle memory. But yeah, I'll just call it Stranger. So the thing about Stranger is, I remember the feeling of being an Oddworld fan, 2003-ish, seeing and being like, okay, so Munch was great. I mean, Munch was what it was, simply, and I wonder what's coming next. And it was just so different. And it was a difference that was, welcomed. And this is pre a lot of internet, I would say, just because of the, the availability of the internet, and, things getting faster, people getting more used to getting what they want as fast as possible. There was a lot more positivity, I think, and a lot less jadedness and entitlement. Frankly, that's just my personal views. And we saw this trailer, and I remember the preview of that cinematic, and that dynamic of like catching bounties. It's like immediately you understood. It's like we all kind of know that bounty hunter thing from like Star Wars, the Boba Fett thing, and Lorne has mentioned his connection to Star Wars with saying like Yoda, like my religion is Yoda, and look at Yoda's kind of odd sort of Muppety kind of feeling, and then you look at Oddworld, it's like, oh, it makes sense, And how cool would it be at some point to have Frank Oz in some way involved in like an Oddworld movie, and to give his voice to some character? I reckon Lorne would flip out with that. But yeah, so we see this. Like it's not almost none of the motifs from what we knew Oddworld to be, right? It was this stranger, and happy anniversary, happy 17th anniversary, stranger was such a special proof of concept that we can expand throughout Moodverse into different corners and nooks and crannies, and it was the template of it, being able to like change your sort of locomotion style. You could run, but then you can lope, and then eventually, which was a twist that I did not see coming. So spoilers for the end of Stranger. Make sure you have played it. 3, 2, 1. When you discover his true nature as a Steve, and being able to sort of ambulate like on all fours, like a centaur. I mean, that's just just casting my mind back even just to that is just something else, And I've speculated, and I know I've had a lot of negativity towards the idea in the main sub. I think people are warming more up to it in Oddworld Inc. The new sub is the idea of a Horizon Zero Odd. Which I've discussed, like the non-fanboyish or starry-eyed, like actual practical way to that. It's like obviously you're not going to have, like right out the gate something like Horizon Zero Dawn in terms of production quality, just because of the scale of what it would take. Because we're looking at Guerrilla, who did shift from a couple of first-party produced Killzone titles, and then they were able to, at that scale, then take on Horizon. Yeah, I know they did scale up and change their staffing, bringing in like John Gonzalez from Fallout New Vegas to do some of the writing, and if you're looking at the Gaia cast now with Horizon, which is really ramping up, I think that might also be why some of this stuff is on my mind. Is because I'm just seeing like I want that for Oddworld. I want to see, as you go out. Say for example, you play like a pilgrim, and maybe the character's name is Pilgrim, right? Just like how we had, Stranger, who was for like he's just known as the Stranger, and like Pilgrim's Journey. It's like Oddworld Pilgrim's Journey or something, and it is this. It could be a mud, just do another Moodycon, or we could take the opportunity to, look at another species, and just as Munch introduced us to the gabbets, and Oddworld, Stranger's Wrath, introduces to the Steve and to the grubs, and that would be again interesting and fresh, and it would sort of catch people's eye. And if there was some sort of negativity towards Oddworld, or skepticism or cynicism, jadedness, whatever, associated with Abe's image, then imagine if they did do something like a Stranger, and it's an Oddworld title, but it has brand new elements, and it's a brand new area of Oddworld, and it is this opportunity to tell that. I mean, frankly, I want to see it like Horizon Zero Odd. I want to see Odd Isolation, which is like a scary kind of Oddworld sort of first person thing. There's, you can go Age of Odd, like Age of Empires, like this, all of these potential nuggets. And that's what I mean about potentially partnering up with someone who would just give them, just like with Tim Schafer's group, Double Fine, with Microsoft, and giving them complete freedom. So I just think they're ripe for an acquisition, or for an upscaling, or for again, giant question mark. So, but anyway, further on into this Pilgrim kind of concept, which I've just now on this show here put a name to it, you'd be looking at maybe like a scholar type of character. I was just coming off of a Film Cow revisitation. Like, stuff's pretty crazy here on the personal life side. Like, my mother-in-law to be has like stage 4 cancer, and we are obviously trying to keep positive every day. And I think jumping into the network stuff, in addition to work, has kind of helped me sort of move through these times, and seeing supportive community members, but even non-supportive ones, just that engagement has been good. And I don't regret any of what I've typed up and posted to Oddworld, the main sub, just as a sort of as a sign of how people can just have different views. But anyway, so part of what I was watching was Film Cow, and they have this Charlie the Unicorn, obviously, but on episode 4 there's a character called Nyx, and he's like this kind of strange armadillo kind of scholar kind of character, and he's like, and I immediately, it's like, I don't think he's a character, spoilers for Charlie the Unicorn, I guess 3, 2, 1 lasts that long, but I immediately thought, well, this is a lot of potential here. Imagine a very inquisitive chronicler who just sets out and a very earnest chronicler, and then maybe at the end of this game he meets Abe, and then this chronicler can do that sort of Conan the Barbarian thing of like, I alone can tell you of Abe's saga. Let me tell you of an age of high, freedom for all living things, which is, Lorne has spoken about the path of the Quintology leading up the pyramid, Abe slowly, amassing this this revolution to sort of, again, my assumption is that by the end of the 5-part tale, and again, I love the parallels with Avatar, which we also do. Avatar podcast is just about to hit 2,000 members, and we're really getting a lot of engagement, and I'm actually bringing, just like a buddy, on like a whatever, like a social outing, and I just sort of with Avatar, I sort of grab Oddworld and taking them with me. And I've mentioned that in a few posts, which is, it's no coincidence, like 2 eco-driven 5-part series with blue ponytail protagonists, with a nature and mysticism versus consumerism and greed kind of narrative, Trojan horse underneath all of the fantasy elements. Like, that's like shared DNA there. So imagine this sort of, back to the kind of Oddworld pilgrimage, concept. I mean, it fully excuses and gives a great context for something like Horizon Zero Dawn, where there's a lot of resource gathering, there's a lot of compendium gathering, and imagine you're out there. We have Pokemon Arceus in a couple of days, and so that also is a touchstone for, because that's about the Hisui region, and how the premise of that game is like, it's the feudal times in the Oddworld timeline, and it's about you going to a new area and starting up its first Pokedex, or whatever. And so then it would be something similar. It's like, hey, I'm this scholar, I come from this distant tribe, and I want to, bring back knowledge to my tribe about this place. And it starts with chronicling, and as was said on the back of the now mythical, beautiful first mention of the Quintology, the back of the CD, instruction booklet. It's like Oddworld is big, very big. It's like, well, if it's really big, then surely there must be at some point there would have had to have been, a I'm trying to mention a historical figure who did some discovery work, but like Sancho Panza or Christopher Columbus or whatever. But they're both horrible, like terrible to the indigenous cultures. But so maybe to keep things really, looking forward with that, and to have some lovely commentary there. It's like, imagine like just an indigenous member from another tribe. Let's just say like an armadillo-inspired Oddworld people, which would be great. Again, taking that film cow influence. Just imagine one of the sort of locomotion styles of this kind of armadillo type hypothetical protagonist is like you can just roll around, and and that would be an amazing way to kind of traverse the world. Look at Raya and the Last Dragon for a bit of reference on that. You have to also keep in mind that as Oddworld are going along, like they're seeing all of these, animated features coming out, and I'm sure Lorne and Sherry know about Raya, and they know about that. Raya, look at it. I mean, it's a game, isn't it? It's about regaining abilities, and the same with the Mandalorian. Actually, recently, and Boba Fett. There's these mechanics, almost this gamified plot elements of like regaining the armor, going on a rescue mission, and all of these things. And that's why the fusion between Oddworld and Interactive and Oddworld, studios, which who knows? I'm just kind of spitballing there, but imagine that like a new wing opens up, like Oddworld Productions, and it's all about like, we as a company see like the same thing that Andy Serkis did with Imaginarium. It's like Oddworld is our word for how we are a bunch of Oddworlds, but also the world itself. Like Oddworld is this sphere, this like gigantic planet, just like Pandora, and like so far we haven't talked about any other planet. It's just that one. So again, the parallels with Avatar continue there, and a great premise for this. Again, there's the surface premise, and then there's the plot relevant. You want there to be some kind of twist. You don't want just that straight flavor, and that's often not how stories work in the real world anyway. So you're there, you're chronicling, and then along the way you discover, okay, this land is having a different kind of exploitation done, and it could be that like its caverns are being melted for like a certain ore, and it's like you discover that it's like as this and that's how you end up meeting Abe, because it's like maybe you even meet in the middle of the story, and potentially, so that there's that sort of Munch's Odyssey type of aspect, but it's all done in like Soulstorm level graphics, and Horizon Zero Dawn or Horizon Forbidden West rather level of visual fidelity and physics and all that. And look, they could, for something like this, they could honestly take as long as they needed, potentially even into the next generation. They want to just spend a certain dedicated amount of time, and then maybe in the interim to have like obviously community streams. Ash is doing a phenomenal job just hosting the streams, those as we call them, lore landing, podcast essentially episodes where it was like about a month ago, and we were just watching, and just Lorne was just going into all of this extremely rich lore, and talking about Nullybab, for example, and who knows, the end of this hypothetical third Quintology title like ends up like he crosses this thing and then discovers Nullybab. And another huge one for me is we're going to actually have a whole podcast episode dedicated to Rango, which in all but name to a degree, there is an element where that could just straight up be an Oddworld story in some elements. Like there's just so much in common there, and I feel like that Will Smith gif of you're standing up and then you're sort of just pointing. It's like this is the proof of how something like this can really work. I mean, I believe it was an Academy Award nominated film, and look at the kind of avian mounts that like the Roadrunners essentially. I mean, it's all sort of real world creatures, but with take Rango as a template, give it an extra year, and just take everything and just Oddworldify it, and that's a film. Like that's an Oddworld film, and there's even definitely some connected DNA there with Stranger. Stranger's Wrath with the Western kind of element. So. For the longest time, that film turned 10 last year, 10 years of Rango. It's one of my favorite films. It's certainly one of my favorite animated films. And, and you could get some real powerful star power there. Lorne, obviously has to be involved on a vocal level. But for this, we just had the Monsterverse amazing announcement again. Oh, it's almost like you're looking at, it's like the puppies all going to their, or the kittens or whatever, all going to their little food chotolas or whatever it is. That's the Italian word. Food bowls or whatever. And it's like this Oddworld puppy is like, where's mine? And I kind of want to pick it up and make sure that it gets it more than its fair share. Like they've fought really, really hard. Like with the Citizen Siege stuff, like they'd almost kind of wrapped things up with Oddworld, and then like the community brought them back, and that's why like the goodwill and the love is what made New and Tasty, and we all love New and Tasty. So see, like that absence of awareness of the recognition of one's power, like we as a community essentially brought Oddworld back ourselves, and now they take one, I guess you could say unexpected turn, to be diplomatic about it, and suddenly there's a sense of like, well, they're not following us, and they're over and whatever, and they're finished or whatever. It's like, wow, talk about whiplash. Like, like if we stuck with them for however many decades, like surely like this pivot which they're doing, like surely you can trust them with that. And that's what I mean. So, but anyway, talking about a couple of things. So, Monsterverse series that was just announced, like that's amazing. Getting their own series there. Chicken Run. I know it might be like, well, why are you talking about Chicken Run? Well, after over 20 years, I believe now, coming up to 20 years, because I think it's 2003, like 19 years. 2003, my gosh, yeah. So yeah, and they've changed voice actors, successfully. I mean, then you've got Metal Gear with Kiefer Sutherland and all that with the David Hayter situation, but imagine like a fully beautifully well produced like Oddworld film, on Netflix coming out, and it tells this like really interesting foundational story. A series would also be great. I would love a series. You look at some of the successful animated series with on the Star Wars side, production value is it's pretty high standard. Obviously, because of the series, they need to kind of mind themselves. I mean, Arcane for me is I mean, I could go into Star Wars, but I think Arcane. I mean, I think it's like the 20th or something, 25th best, highest rated IMDb thing. And I just had some friends confirm it's like, yeah, I didn't like some parts, but I really, and this person's like super hard to please, like a friend of the family. And she was like, yeah, no, I want to be thanked for being positive. I'm like, that was funny. But her take on it was like, it's just a beautiful show. And so that's another thing that I can't imagine at all that that Oddworld, Lorne and Sherry have overlooked. And I'm sure that they'd be sharing a lot more of this thinking with us if they didn't think that there was maybe some trepidation, especially with the Reddit. And it's a shame because the Reddit, I mean, you even have it in the dynamic, the karma system. It's such a great fit for Oddworld, and I'm glad to have been able to set up the new one and with all the different categories, and we're getting quite a bit of involvement in this one. Goes out later in just a few hours. Just gonna put this one together. I decided not to do the camera shot, so I could just play some footage of what I'm talking about. And just so that it's that immediate visual. But definitely, I think with the next one, when we get the community members on board, that'll be nice to kind of everyone have their webcams on and kind of get that party happening. I really, by the end of 2022, I would love to be able to look back on like, 20 or 30, whatever, however many episodes of the Oddworld podcast and be like, we really built something. And, Oddworld Inc., the Reddit group we just passed 1,000 people, da da da. and we're excited, we're looking, we're paying attention, we're engaged, we're celebrating. That's what I mean. So and it's fine. Like the Oddworld is a big place. It's big enough for a couple of different subreddits, and I'm involved in a few communities where I do wonder sometimes, like, well, why isn't there more of this? And like Legacy of Kain, for example, where obviously there's for obvious reasons why there's got a few really amazing independent content creators and analysts who are creating these beautiful long essays. But in terms of a centralized, dedicated podcast, we haven't, and like a regular and like highly visible and easy to find. And that's why I've just gone with just calling them what they are. And I think some community member was like, "That's all you do. You just sort of take these names and you create these shows." It's like, have you ever had a? It's almost like going up to some like a kid with a scrapbook and be like, "Look at you! Like, do you own the IP rights to these images? And have you cleared it with people before you like take your little Yoo-hoo glue stick and like create your scrapbook?" And I'm like, "Yeah, so I'm just not doing any of what you sort of have created in your mind that I'm doing." And it's crazy. Like this person was like, "Hey, you're gaslighting all these people into believing you're this person affiliated." It's like, literally, absolutely not. Like, it's the first thing is the most obvious thing is that it's like not connected in any official capacity. It's just this lovely kind of little companion show, and I saw the URLs, and it's extremely fulfilling, And I always find like people who accuse really heavily of one person of being a certain thing, it's often the case that they themselves are that thing. And it's the great irony of the great irony of it was like in this big kind of endeavor to gaslight, they themselves were, as well, to say that I was someone who gaslighted people. They themselves were just like, wow, they had like painted my entire psyche. And it's like, this is who you are. It's like straight up impossible, first of all, especially for someone who's throwing up all these walls. And we can't ever really ultimately know who another person is anyway. So that was just really amusing. And as well, another thing was amusing was the taunting names. I think one was Albert Kesser as a pedo and one is Albert the Virgin. It's like, I have never been a part of it. I mean, it was just funny, really, but it was a real indicator. And I've added them to the Chronicle so that you can see on the Instagram, just like this is where we were at in end of 2021, start of 2022, in terms of some of the toxicity and like some of what I'm now recognizing. It's like, actually, thank you for motivating me. Thank you for giving me this clarity about moving forward with it. It's very simple. It's like the simplest thing. It's like everything that's happened, with between the community and OE, Oddworld inhabitants. It is what it is. And let's focus on this very real pathway towards something truly, truly brilliant. I mean, when I see Soulstorm, a lot of people have their own thoughts about it, but when I play it as well, I just see this is a beautiful flower bed of potential. And I see the amount of work that went into the cinematics and the lore. First of all, that opening is just so much like Lorne talking about, like, we're tired, we're so tired. I mean, he's obviously talking about Oddworld inhabitants. They've just finished New and Tasty, and that's almost a reference to the Exodus days where they had just finished Oddworld Abe's Odyssey. And they would right then and there, straight after, were asked to do Exodus in such a short amount of time, which parallels like he's just gotten out of Raptor Farms, he's just saved so many Mudokons, and then he's immediately being asked. It's like, well, things are great now, but now is that moment. Now is now over, and there you go. And I love that they carried that element, even though they took much longer, and which was good, to even balance with the pandemic. I'm sure. Man, the pandemic, they're being very, I think, classy about just how much it must have messed with them. I mean, we're talking like having to like move so like as an independent company. This isn't a Sony backed or anything. Like they had to really pivot with their like consoles and like have to take stuff home and like read like Oddworld inhabitants was like no one was prepared, but like. Just imagine it like a smaller scale place, trying to be able to move it as quickly, and then have a fan base who, to some extent, like expects a level of agility as a company and as creators that you just, I mean, of I mean, I guess from one point of view, it's flattering. It's like we hold you in that same pantheon as like, hey, why isn't this happening sooner? It's like, well, thank you for thinking of us as, in that same run of names as like the Metal Gears and, the Final Fantasies or whatever. But, like this is the realities of the independent game. And look, for me, if they go with Netflix, if they go with potentially, I think Amazon would be a bit too much for Lorne because it's like they are, the height of the. I mean, I'm excited about the Rings of Power. Like that looks great, and it seems like the creators, creating that like physical, actual. They properly did that title sequence with like real steel and like real molten steel and stuff. And I mean, this seems like there's a lot of heart behind that. And they've said like we want this to exist on the same shelf. We want it to feel as though everything being told here, like the Rings of Power, that title can sit on the spine of a book next to Tolkien's works and contains all those second age stories. Well, that's what I mean. Why not have an Oddworld story set in like the second age of Oddworld, where it's this earlier time? I mean, that would obviously prevent the Abe unification at the end. Although there's such a thing as like you have this whole experience in this sort of Arthur Morgan kind of way, and then Red Dead 2 is a prequel. And imagine again that potential of like the ecosystem and being able to see like meechers, like herds of meechers, roaming around, and just like that fully, what we saw with the early days of the Oddworld Instagram, just seeing all of those ideas finally brought to life, right? Of the different fauna, and having that opportunity to create like a proper Oddworld ecosystem, which, there was a couple of simple creatures and stuff, but not in a way in that sort of living world kind of way that they did with Red Dead. If I had to pick between them, I mean, they both have great elements, but if you went with, especially since we're talking about Stranger's Wrath as this launching off point for, the continuation of this rebirth in a way that like essentially contextualizes Soulstorm as this, this reset button, brand new assets built, brand new, I think Unreal Engine 5 kind of, involvement, and or sorry, Unity or other, whatever they end up going with. And it's like they have all these standing assets, and then you look at something like I mean, you have technically there's three. There's Red Dead, there's Breath of the Wild, and then there's Horizon. And the reason I bring up Breath of the Wild is I mean, as soon as I say something like Breath of the Odd, you understand exactly what I'm talking about, right? You have a gliding kind of flying mount sort of thing. You mean you saw Ubisoft do their own version of it with Immortals Phoenix Rising, and you could easily do something like that. So those are your three potential touchstones in terms of scale. If you want to do something more on the photoreal side, but like a bit tighter, so less ability to like scale everything, you're looking more at that Horizon and Red Dead, or you can go with something just with, I suppose, a less photoreal art style that has obviously, if the less you go with photoreal, the more the bigger the scale of the world, and I suppose you can go more into. I mean, soon this won't be an issue anyway, especially with the upcoming sequel to the Breath of the Wild. I think we're going to start seeing like there won't have to be a compromise. We'll be able to do the fully photoreal world, and as well as the Breath of the Wild style kind of exploration and traversal. So those are three big touchstones for this hypothetical Oddworld pilgrimage. Pilgrimage, if they want to have the main character named Grummage or something or whatever, like they can do another pun, just like they did with Oddworld Abe's Odyssey. I've given my thoughts on like making Iliad, in a reference to the Iliad, because there's Exodus, Iliad, and Odyssey, which are these words that evoke, these grand journeys. And that's what I mean. I would love Aloy's journey. It's a beautiful, really wonderfully laid. Like you've got the cauldrons, you have this great structure. You can, and same with Breath of the Wild, you can approach things in this omnidirectional way. Same with Red Dead, and tackle these quests. I mean, is an unexplored avenue. Just like at that point with Oddworld, you hadn't had a bounty hunter game, and that instilled a lot of excitement. It's like it's a very similar thing. I mean, people had negativity towards Munch, right, because of the pivot. Well, things happen in cycles in that way. We could be seeing as, Soulstorm could be a bit of a Munch situation, or an Oddworld Ascension situation, if you will. Again, I love the title for what it is. And I'm having a blast playing it. And then what came after that, you got Stranger, which really set things in, it locked things in. People loved it, that idea of the third person, first person, the amount of innovation just because of that different area of the world. What if we visited like a Pacific Islander inspired region of Oddworld, right? Because we saw the West. Perhaps with Nolibad, we'll see a I guess Babylonian inspired region. I know that it's basically a giant city, maybe a Blade Runner inspired title there. Again, you have a noir, you have an investigation. Hey, I'm taking you all aside by the scruff now. I'm not by the scruff, I'm kind of hugging you. But imagine, down the line, like a Blade Runner, like a PI, like a private detective noir inspired Oddworld story where you're having to piece together these crimes, and it takes, maybe that could be I keep saying quantum mythical, that's my thing that I'm writing, but Quintology number 4 could be this noir thing. So Quintology 3 is open world, Quintology 4 is noir, and Quintology 5 could be, I don't know, I guess, who knows, maybe something Last of Us inspired, just to really add to that epicness, make it feel like this beautiful. And Lorne is like, yeah, in 2030, whatever, he's like, yeah, we're looking at something where we can really bring everything to a head emotionally, and like that beautiful catharsis. And I'm sorry, but if I think about that, it's like, wow, I almost get teary. It's like the idea of finishing the Quintology, which there's just been so many unexpected twists and turns. Again, remember, imagine you're doing something, then you straight up think you're never going to finish it, never going to do it. Like that was Citizen Siege, and I would love, again, down the line to see Citizen Siege in some way, right? But he did at one point, because of the community, and I think I might tail things off on that note, because of the community, Oddworld came back, and that's kind of sort of the sentiment I wanted to leave folks listening and tuning into this one, and leave you with that notion is let's in a non-naive and non-over-idealistic way, and in a irrational way, like grounded in rationality, grounded in reality, grounded in precedents, that there are precedents to these pivots going beautifully well, like with God of War, and again, if you type God of War now, it's talk about a successful reinvention, right? None of the, very often if you just Google it, it'll just come up with the 2018 game. To think that a series that of over a decade of titles, got reinvented with one title, and that's what I mean. So with enough positivity and galvanizing and rallying of the community, and we'll have this podcast now, hopefully we actually get the official, because we have the Last of Us podcast ourselves, me and Catherine and Anne-Marie. Then there is the official, Last of Us podcast, and we sort of serve as a bit of an ancillary show to that. On the community side, we'll be doing episode reviews of each of the, the HBO series, and cool little tie-in with the Monsterverse is you have Craig Mazin, who's working on Last of Us. Craig Mazin did Chernobyl. Chernobyl would be an amazing touchstone for this upcoming Monarch series, and just like I would love to see all of the Arcane people, or a lot of the Arcane people on the Netflix side getting involved with Oddworld, because that would be such a beautiful art style as well for a story. You just immediately, as soon as I say that, there's that story about James Cameron walking into the thing and saying, going up to the alien sign, and then just putting the word S and then $2 or whatever. But he ended up custom designing, the queen, and really being so passionate, and he said he did it as a joke, but that's what I mean. Art and commerce can go so well together, and that's all that needs to happen. And that's the thing with God of War is it told this brand new story. It was a risk in many ways, but because of the quote unquote, proven, well, not quote unquote, actual proven formula of stories like The Last of Us with the companion character and Uncharted, that's why Sony said, you know what, this is risky. I mean, you're taking a completely unrelated thing and then, giving it this new genre. Very risky, but oh my god, did it pay off? Ragnarok, this whole new influx of mythology, like scholars, you get on IGN scholars react to, or historians or mythologists react to God of War. Like, it's just had this beautiful new lease on life, and let this, podcast, first of the year, for myself, and the first Oddworld podcast in I think almost over a year, definitely. That's definitely changing. With we're going to close out the year with episode 3, and then start the next. Close out the month with episode 3, and then start the next month. Hopefully, I'll just say it's a she, and she's a rad human being from the community. So cool, odd pal. We'll agree to episode 4. And we can keep the ball rolling, and really, again, as we go along, start bringing in sort of that OE involvement, and sort of having them see, the community have this thing that they're doing now. It's this separate thing from the older Reddits, this new Reddit, this new podcast, and to sort of get some of them chiming in and sort of kind of keeping us updated. And again, this will all be no expectations whatsoever if we end up just going through all of this year and then even onwards with the podcast with just ourselves. That'll be just as fun. So I'll leave you with that, that adage of, like, you have so much power as a community member. Definitely, even also on the creator side, if you're a creator, like, that's something that, there was a comment recently on one of the subs, I can't remember, but it was like, Sherry and Lorne love seeing, the fan art and the fan creations and the community creations. And this show, I mean, we're a community show, so we are community creation, and it's also going to be a place where I want to do our own share of signal boosting of these oddlings or oddworlders, or muds out there, chumps out there in the world. So I'm just so stoked, and I'm so glad for all of you who joined in, and I consider you all odd pals, like good nuggets out there in the world. So, folks, I leave you with that. You stay positive, really enjoy this sense of, like, anticipation, what's going on. Again, anticipation. I did 70 plus episodes of Kojima during the build up to Death Stranding. It was such a great opportunity to theorize. Like, for me, silence is the furthest thing from frustrating. It's inspiring. It's like, what could happen, and sort of let your imagination take flight. And if you look up, there's a post that I made called the Hypelosophy post. So hype, the word hype, then philosophy, as in the second half of the word philosophy. And you basically have 4 options when it comes to anything. So say you're looking forward to something, or you want something to happen. Well, the first choice you have is to, not get excited, right? And then the thing doesn't happen. And so you get nothing, right? Second choice is you get excited, but the thing doesn't happen. Well, at least you got to get excited, and enjoy that journey, right? Then you have the thing, it's like you don't get excited, but then the thing does happen, so it's like you kind of missed out, right? That's the third option. But the fourth option, which is just, it really is nothing could be more fulfilling. And again, you go into it without any expectations of this happening, but it's that idea that you get excited, like we're getting excited on this show, and then the thing does happen. And then, we get the announcement in like a week or so that Oddworld are doing this thing, and they want to have this multimedia thing, which, a joint statement, Oddworld inhabitants, announces, February, March, 2022, after, having conversing with various different companies about the potential for this series. Finally, I get to, have this approach which I've wanted to do for a while, and so companies allowing us, or we've made this decision. We've had some investors, whatever language ends up being used. But I know that Lorne and Sherry are very protective, and they know what they're doing. That's all I'll say. Now, from an intuitive point of view, not on I'm presuming to know them, or not on a blind. Someone, I think, on the subreddit was like, Skynet sent Albert to do all these, like, start planting all these positivity seeds. Now this is me completely operating independently, but I have this strong sense, really right to my core, that things are going to be brighter than ever for Oddworld much sooner than you think. So stay odd out there, and until next time, bye for now.